Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Chats with Children. I hope you're safe and well. Today, I'm delighted to join by my good friend, Noel Maestre, who is director of, I don't even know how to pronounce this properly, SlateXpace with,
SlateXpace.
or SlateSpace, right? Okay, with an emphasis on ATMPs. And I actually caught up with Noel, God, it must have been about October time, I think, last year,
Mhm.
when they had just launched, and he was one of the co-authors for a cell and gene therapy report, and we actually went through the findings of that report. So, Noel, how are you, my friend?
I'm very good. Nice to talk to you again, Rizwan. How are you?
Very well. We were just talking actually with viewers before we came online about how Noel has got COVID here now because his hair's got a bit longer. So,
It is getting a bit long. We'll see
so
what it looks like by the next interview.
yeah, we'll see if we're down to here. So Noel is actually calling in from sunny San Diego. And again, we were just talking about how San Diego seems to have escaped the cold grip, which has gone all across the States at the moment. Whereas it's 10 p.m. here in the UK. So it's dark and miserable outside. So a bit of a contrast here we have today. So no, first of all, I hope you're well. Before we start talking about, and today we're actually going to be looking back at 2020 and looking ahead to 2021, looking at the trends around 2021. But before we start doing that, Noel, for those not familiar with SlateSpace, can you just give a quick overview of the business and also your role within that as well, in your background?
Sure. So SlateSpace is an offering that is a CRB offering. We're an integrated AEC consulting and construction firm. And SlateSpace is really a platform that we developed over the last 16 months to create what we think is the future of biotech manufacturing, where it really decouples the process from the manufacturing space and provides a very flexible manufacturing environment that's delivered in very short timeframes with high cost certainty, really trying to meet the needs of the life science industry that have been even more highlighted by some of the things that have happened last year with COVID and speed to market.
Great. And your background?
My background is I lead our San Diego office. I've been with CRB for 15 years now, and actually stepping into a new role, heading up our global life sciences market. So very excited to be speaking with you again.
Fantastic. So let's look at 2020. So how would you describe that in one word and why?
I'd say unprecedented.
Right. I know it's pretty obvious, but why would you say that?
Well, so obviously there's the obvious piece, which is the pandemic, but I think it was kind of a perfect storm. If I look at CRB, we had the pandemic, which forced us to go fully remote on March 15th, and we've essentially almost been fully remote since then. And then kind of the perfect storm of the life science industry when COVID started really slowed down for a few months, and we're starting to get a little antsy, wondering where things are going to head. And then it just came back full throttle. And so the first half of the year was so different than the second half of the year. We were extremely busy. A lot of warp speed type projects, including I think 7 or 8 warp speed projects. So clients looking for us to deliver facilities and manufacturing spaces and solutions in record amounts of time to help fight this pandemic.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. We'll touch upon that a little bit later. So, I mean, like you said, the pandemic sort of hit everybody at the beginning of the year, and certainly from March onwards, as you say, when everybody started going to lockdown. So, as a business, have you been able to sort of hit your targets and objectives that you started the year out with in 2020?
Actually, we have. As I was mentioning, it was kind of a tale of two halves of the year, and our first half of the year was good, but then really slowed down as with the uncertainty of the pandemic. But the back half of the year really came back very strong, and CRB had another record year last year after hitting a record year the prior year. And to tell you where we are poised today is if things go in the right direction, it looks like we're on track to do the same thing again in 2021.
Yeah, well, you're making a run for your own back there, Noel, because people expect that now every year in these record years, won't they? So,
Well, it's a pretty good industry to be in. life science industry has always been a pretty strong industry. And so obviously the pandemic brought on not only all the existing work that we already had in place, but a whole slew of COVID related projects. So it really kind of doubled our workload.
Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, I know you're a global organization. So I've spoken to various other people who work in global organizations. And so when did you start planning for the pandemic, and what did you already have in place to help you?
Good question. It was a little bit of a transition, but we had in early February, we had one of our local business leaders here in the Western region start kind of alerting the company that this is something we should pay attention to. And very quickly, things moved pretty quickly from then on. So early March is when we set up kind of a task force around COVID and how we're going to prepare ourselves as a company. And then by March 15th, two weeks later, we were fully remote. That's 20 offices going fully remote, 1,500 employees going fully remote, essentially, in a matter of a couple of days.
That's impressive.
And luckily, it didn't really impact us as much as we thought it would. Being an AEC organization, a consulting firm, there's a lot of collaboration required in our day-to-day interactions. And so we always felt that it was really important to have all of our employees in the office to make sure that we have those creative collisions and those interactions. And what we found is that because we are decentralized and have so many different offices, we already had all the infrastructure and IT systems in place to do a lot of work sharing. And so we're able to take that and just leverage that to be able to now implement it to everyone working from home.
Right. Okay. And was working from home and adding the new systems the only thing you had to change, or were there other things that you had to change as a business structurally to cope with the pandemic?
Generally, not a lot. No, I mean, we had to put a lot of procedures in place for employees that needed to be on site when we are doing work at manufacturing sites, and so a lot of COVID protocols and safety related protocols. But from an overall infrastructure of the company, we didn't have to do all that much. A lot of it was in place. We had to ramp up our capacity to do, instead of having, 10 people on a Zoom call, now you had to have 50 or 100 or things of that nature. We had to scale up a lot of our systems. But by and large, a lot of them were already in place.
Right. And in terms of the market and also your customers, obviously you mentioned already that for the first part, it was relatively quiet and then it sort of accelerated. But in terms of how you worked with your customers, obviously you're working remotely now. How were you able to sort of still service your customers and keep up the high levels of service and meet their demands, if you like, project-wise, having to work remotely?
I would say the one downside that we've seen out of this remote, well, there's probably more than one, but one clear downside out of this remote work environment is it's changed the dynamic of how we work, in the sense that everything is meeting related now, right?
Right.
There are no more just everyone sitting around a conference room table with our client to do a drawing review or to talk about, all meet up in a trailer to talk about the construction strategy. A lot more of it is meeting after meeting after meeting, which is taxing for our workforce, and I'm sure for our clients as well. But it was really leveraging a lot of those same platforms that I think a lot of people are using, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and other kind of interactive video conferencing, a lot more focus on actually using video too. We used to use these platforms and we used to just use the audio piece. We would never kind of turn on the camera. And now that's totally changed the culture, right? It's almost kind of awkward if you're not on camera now.
Yeah, it's like, what are you hiding if you don't put the camera on?
Right, exactly. Where are you?
What are you doing while you're talking to me? That's the question.
You on the golf course?
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit noisy in the background. What's going on? Right. Yeah. So moving from the negative that you just said, so looking at the positives though. So what positives would you say have come out though of last year, both for the business and also for the industry as well?
So I think starting with the business, the positives that we've seen come out of it is been patience. Our company was patient We weathered about an entire quarter of really bad, financial outlook, without having to do anything to impact our workforce.
Right.
And actually, we kind of doubled down and created a lot of programs to help people who were now working at home and who children were not in school, and so they needed to juggle all these different priorities. And so I think out of that, one of the really positive things that's come out is re-emphasize or a higher emphasis on our people, and not just looking at them as the employee who shows up to work, but now you're really getting a sense of like people in their daily lives, right? Because they're calling and the cat's crawling across the keyboard, or the children are playing in the background. And so there's a whole another human aspect that's kind of evolved out of that dynamic of working from home. I think we were really able to support our people through very difficult times, and we're also able to support our clients through very challenging times for them.
Right.
And obviously, being in the industry that we're in, one of the major accomplishments that we had for this year was working on so many of these COVID projects. Some of them are licensed, some of them are late stage clinical and probably about ready to get approved. So those are all really good things that came out of this year. And I guess maybe the last thing is, with all the socio-political events happening in the US and across the world, we've really reshaped our policies and our outlook on diversity and inclusion.
Right.
And so really had a very intentional focus this year as well, in terms of building up more programs to make sure that we're as inclusive and as open as an organization as we could possibly be.
That's brilliant. And again, you're not the only person I've spoken to at a big organization who said that, which is great to see that people are sort of looking at that now and incorporating that into their company culture and their values as well. So what key learnings would you say you would take out from last year, this year, 2020, and what do you think you might have done differently?
I would say some of the key learnings, one of the big things is around the remote work and the flexibility, right? I think if we look at it today, it's almost silly for us to think that we can't operate in this manner. And so when things come back to whatever we want to call normal one day, we're going to be probably somewhere in between, but give employees a lot more flexibility. Some of the things we would have done differently, I think, is we're still learning from it. There's still some challenges. We're trying to figure out in which ways we can best support our employees. And I think one of them is that mental fatigue of being on conference calls all day long. And so how do we lessen that burden and make it more enjoyable and more organic? And so that's something we probably still haven't resolved. Things that we would have done differently, there's nothing that really kind of sticks out in my mind. I think, there are a lot of things where we could have probably acted more proactively. Some of these, whether it was around the socio-political events that are happening or around the pandemic, at first it's a little bit of a reactive mode, right? Due to the pandemic, you're like, this isn't necessarily, going to be as bad as we think it's going to be. And it's kind of the same thing with everything else that happened in 2020. So I think maybe be more proactive around addressing issues, before they become a big deal.
Yeah, well, hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? It's easy to say that when you've got hindsight and you know what's actually happened. So, but you mentioned, the new normal. So what do you think the new normal is looking like going forward, not just in this year, but sort of beyond that as well?
Well, I think for us, the new normal will be it'll be a hybrid system where we are now going to be partly working from home, partially working in the office, give people a lot more flexibility around how they want to structure their work-life balance, and really just come at it from a different standpoint. It kind of shattered a lot of the old adages, right? There's a lot of things that we thought were reasons why we were successful in executing certain projects, certain tasks, that all of a sudden we go, well, now we get to rethink this from a fresh standpoint. And so that's one of the things that's going to be interesting. We're continuing, like I said, to learn as to what the new normal is going to look like. But I think the biggest impact is it's given us kind of an opportunity to reset and then figure out what is going to be the most optimal way to move forward, in 2021 and beyond.
And what do you think in terms of working with your clients, though? As you said, you've now been working remotely and having to work remotely with a lot of them in terms of the projects. So again, do you think that'd be more of a hybrid? Do you think, or will you go back to the days where everybody's going out to see their clients as much as possible, and you will be doing very little in terms of the video conferences? Or do you think it will be more of a mix now, because clients will be happy to do the video conferences rather than you coming into their offices all the time?
It's interesting. I think we will go back pretty close to what it was pre-pandemic, but obviously that depends on a multitude of different factors. Are we going to be all wearing masks for the next 4 or 5 years? Whether or not we're vaccinated, is a lot of questions around that. But I think there is a like an innate need for that. People want to get back out there. They would like to get back out to client sites, and so I could almost see it rebounding, kind of having the pendulum swing to the other side for a while, where people are really excited to be in the office, really excited to see clients and have face-to-face lunches and things of that nature.
Cool. All right. So I know obviously you have been working on a very hot area, the ATMPs, which have been in the news a lot over the last 12 months. So what do you see as the key development and trends for life science and pharma, not just for 2021, but moving ahead as well? What do you think the big trends are that we should be looking out for?
I think flexibility and adaptability, not just around the workforce, but I think, as we're talking about this new mix of different products, biotech's been dominated by therapeutic proteins for a long time, and now we've got a huge resurgence in vaccines, and there's an entire array of vaccine technologies out there, as well as a lot of new emerging technologies. And so manufacturing is probably going to look different than it used to, in the sense of clients need more and more flexibility to be able to handle diverse pipelines and more complex business situations.
Right. And are there any particular sort of technologies you think which are going to be more prominent? I mean, is it because obviously the vaccines have come out with the mRNA vaccine, so that's a lot of people talking about those sort of transferring over to other sorts of modalities and using them for other sorts of treatments. I mean, what do you think, from the people you've been speaking to, the projects that you're involved in, do you think are going to be very popular in 2021 and further forward?
One of the trends that we're seeing a lot are oligo and peptides, which has historically been kind of a smaller field, subset of pharma. That's growing very quickly. mRNA products are growing very quickly. Cell and gene therapy is still kind of, the floodgates are about to open, right? But we've been saying that for about 2 years now. There's a handful of licensed products, and there's, I think, 1,500 in clinical trials. So really, it could be multiple different avenues that really just continue to balloon and thrive in this industry. I think the other thing that is a good strong takeaway from 2020 is speed to market is everything.
Right.
The ability for this entire world scientific community to come together and collectively try to solve one of the biggest problems that our generations has had to face, and be able to come out with vaccines in a record amount of time. I mean, vaccine development historically was like a 5+ year timeline, and we've done it in 12 months or 11 months, right? Maybe less. And so we're seeing that there's such a sense of urgency in all these projects, right? Whether they're government mandated or where they're client mandated. And so I think the industry is never going to go back to saying, well, now we can kind of relax our standards in terms of, what the delivery process to get these drugs out to market, out of research and into manufacturing environment and out to market. I think that's never going to come back. And so there's a whole new paradigm around how we deliver projects and deliver facilities, whether they're laboratories or manufacturing facilities. That speed to market and that kind of turnkey delivery is something that we're seeing a very strong demand for by almost all of our clients.
Right. And do you think, though, that obviously a lot of the activity which has happened in the last 12 months has been obviously because of Operation Warp Speed, and lots of other governments have been obviously putting a huge amount of funding behind vaccine development and test kits and so on. So obviously, as things start to settle down on that front, hopefully with more vaccines coming online and so on and things getting under control, do you think that the funding's still going to be there for these other sort of developments to the same level, that you'll still be able to get the funding to be able to do these new technologies transference into other sort of diseases and modalities?
I think so. And I don't know if it's all going to be government funded versus private venture capitalist funded. But if you look at 2020, just in cell and gene therapy alone, it the projections are already like a 20 or 25% compounded growth annually, and 2020 beat out the projections. And so, and those are private investments, they weren't government investments.
Right.
So I think there's going to continue to be both, especially if, what we're reading in the news these days is that, COVID is maybe something more like the flu that is not going to be eradicated like polio, for example, but is something we're going to continuously be dealing with and continuously mutating. I think there's going to be more investment in pandemic preparedness and vaccine development, so that we can continue to fight this particular pandemic, or better prepared for the next wave, which hopefully is a little ways down the road, but surely will probably happen again one day.
All right. And so what are the company's CRBs and SlateXpace's plans for 2021 and beyond then? So what are your plans for this year? As you said, you're already expecting to do better than last year, which was a record year, which was better the year before. So, but where are you seeing the growth as a business, and what are you sort of focusing on in the next 12 months?
A lot of those, it's a mixture. I would say, in the life science arena, there is a huge demand for laboratory space right now. There's a huge shortage of R&D space. There's a huge shortage of manufacturing space. We're seeing completely new entities kind of evolve out of those needs. One of them is these developers that now want to create leasable cleanroom space, because the CMOs are, have so much backlog, and they've got 12 to 18 months of backlog. The operating companies don't have enough manufacturing spaces, and so now other players are coming in and saying, well, we want to enter this life science market, and we want to, take a different approach where we're going to create a space that we can lease out to these companies.
Right.
So we're seeing all sorts of different new players kind of infiltrate the life science market. I think it is, the crystal ball is foggy when it comes to where exactly are things going to shift. But what I would say is generally the industry as a whole seems to be on track to have another extremely strong year this year, and potentially even carry into 2022, because a lot of the projects that we do are 12, 16, 18, 24 months long. And so I would say, very, very strong outlook for the next year and a half at least.
Brilliant. So final thing, what message would you have for those who are watching this right now for the coming year? What's your sort of New Year's? I know we're into February now, but what's your New Year's message for everyone?
I would tell people to be patient. I know it's been a long time, and it's almost feels like BC, right? Before COVID was years ago at this point. but we're almost there. You know, there are vaccines out there that are currently commercialized. There are other other vaccines that are going to roll out soon, and now is the time to be patient, the time to be safe, and hopefully within a matter of a couple more months, we'll be in a much better situation. But I think most importantly is to be hopeful. Right? It's been a very challenging year for a year and a half for people, 2020 and the start of 2021, and I think a lot of us are feeling it in a variety of different ways.
Sure.
And you know, I think we will all learn and be more resilient from having gone through this experience, and really look forward to really what's going to come next, because I think a lot of good things are going to come out of this.
Well, I certainly hope so. That's well said. And also, you sound like a typical PSG fan, because the hope and everything is coming out there for the Champions League later on this year in June, because they're doing very well, aren't they? So there you go. Your patience will pay off, hopefully, Noel. So that was really interesting. Thank you very much for sharing your insights, actually, Noel, because it was really good to know what your thoughts were and how the year's been for you, and also some of these trends that you're talking about. Is fascinating, actually, to think about what lies ahead for us within life science. So all I can say is thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been a pleasure to see you again, my friend.
Likewise, Rizwan. Great speaking with you again.
Yeah, and I wish you and PSG and your loved ones and everyone else a fantastic 2021. I hope you're safe, happy, successful, and most importantly healthy for the year. And I wish that for everybody else watching, until next time, as always, well, actually, I nearly forgot, if you've got any questions for Noel based on what he said, please feel free to put comments below the video, because I'm sure Noel will be more than delighted to answer them for you as well. And I'll put the link for SlateXpace and CRB above the video as well, so you can find out more about the business as well and what they do, and also the link to the cell and gene therapy report that we talked about last time as well, because you might find that very interesting as well, because that was to be quite relevant for people if they want to read it. So all that says is stay well, stay safe. Until next time, bye-bye.